Good afternoon, everyone. Allison Scoberg here, Consolidated Planning Group. We are super excited to be here with you this Tuesday afternoon over your lunch. Today, we are excited to have the law office of Christina Lesher and her team with us today, and they're going to be going over a really important topic. And this is actually one that we have not ever talked about, not any of our educational series. We've never really talked deep and wide about this. So I'd like to introduce her team. We have Robert Pierce here, and he is her care manager on her team. And we have Maite, and she is a paralegal on her team. So very, very vital, important people in her group. So we wanted to just introduce them. Again, Allison Scoberg, Consolidated Planning Group. If you're joining us for the first time, we're really glad you're here. If you're coming back again and you are a serial attender of our webinars, we're happy to have you back. Today's meeting is being recorded. You guys, your cameras are off and you are in a muted mode. We do want to answer as many questions as we possibly can. So if you will use your chat box today, if you have questions throughout the presentation, I'll be monitoring the chat box, and we will again get through just as many as we can. Today's webinar is scheduled for an hour, so we will be done on or before 1 o'clock. So you can plan your lunch hour that way as well. So having said that, Christina, I'm going to turn it right on over to you to get started.
Well, thank you so much, Allison, and thank you for all the great programming that you guys do. I can tell everybody that we've learned a lot from some of the other programming that Allison, you and your team do. So thank you so much for having us today. This is a very important and personal topic for us. Robert and I actually are siblings, so just so everybody has full disclosure on what's going on, and the information I'm about to share with you will have a little bit more context. So Robert and I have a medically fragile nephew who is, I'm going to say, oh my gosh, 10, and he is on MDCP. And I want to say it was maybe 5 years ago, Rob.
Yeah, it was about 5 years ago.
My sister got a notice in the mail saying that our nephew's services and nursing hours were going to be reduced. And he had been on MDCP since he was born. And we, even though I'm a lawyer and Rob's a care manager, we had to dig in and figure out what are we going to do about this. We were able to successfully reinstate his hours, but it really illustrated to us that getting on Medicaid is just the first step. Maintaining benefits and maintaining your hours and maintaining the services is really the hard work that has to continue to be done even after Medicaid benefits are awarded. So we're going to give everybody on the call today some specific takeaways and tips so that if this happens, if you get that annual review and they send you a reduction of services notification, I'm going to give you a punch list of things to do. All right, Rob, let's go to that next slide. So Rob, I'm going to let you do the first two bullet points, and then I'll head up on what to do if this happens.
Sure. So a lot what we see when we see service reductions, it kind of comes into pretty much basic categories, and that would be loss of hours. And that's either loss of respite hours, caregiving hours, nursing hours, anything like that you get in your plan of care. Also would be the denial or reduction of services. So not covering a medication, not covering a physical therapy, durable medical equipment, supplies, issues like that also come up. We see that a lot, especially as children grow in age. And all these things really usually happen during either the annual assessment or when you're applying for benefits initially. So those are the major really kind of stress times for families when you're talking about the changes in your plan of care or your programming or your benefits that you're receiving from Medicaid.
And so for the families that are hearing us today, and I'm able to see a little bit of the chat boxes. One of the questions that I think has popped up is, are we going to get a specific list? We didn't have like a specific checklist, but here's one of the things everybody needs to know. If you get a reduction of services notice, because if Medicaid decides they want to reduce your nursing hours, your PASAB hours, not cover a medication, they are required to give you notice in writing. Once you receive that notice, don't just leave it on the coffee table, don't want to address it. Immediately, you need to file what we call a continuation of benefits. It does not have to be a fancy letter. It's just, for example, when we had my nephew, we said, "Dear Medicaid, we've received notice that James has a reduction in services. We are requesting an appeal, and we also request a continuation of his service benefits." If you do that within 10 days of the notice, until the appeal, if it has to go to an appeal, is finalized, your child will maintain their Medicaid benefits during that whole time period. So that's very important. When you send it, you're going to want to send it by fax, get the confirmation page, and also send it by CMRRR. That's the certified mail return receipt requested. It does not have to be a fancy letter. You just want to request an appeal and request a continuation of service benefits. The tricky thing about Medicaid is when they send you a notice of reduction or denial, they may send the notice and you may not get it until 8 days after they send it. Read the letter carefully to determine when that 10 days is up. I would do it this very same day you receive it. If you receive it close to or after the 10-day period, which is on the letter, immediately call Medicaid and tell them, "I did not have my 10-day notice." Then also include that information in your request for continuation of services. A side note, this is where making sure Medicaid has your current address is very, very important. So if they send it to the wrong address because you haven't updated the information, then they may or may not believe that you, or give you any wiggle room on this. So one of the questions I had was about the certified mail. That is snail mail with a certified green card. So it's like an old school letter, which we used to write and type up paper. You type it up, you take it to the post office, and then you say you want it sent certified mail return receipt requested. And then you will also send it by fax, old school style fax. Don't try to do it online. I don't know if you can, maybe through my Texas Public Benefits, maybe you could. I don't recommend that here. I would do fax, go to Kinko's, FedEx, get that fax confirmation page back and send it certified mail return receipt requested. Okay. And I'm hoping that was a clarification. I'm trying to look at the chat.
Christina, yeah, and I'll watch that chat for
Okay.
you. On the what if I missed that? What if I missed the 10 days? What if I didn't know? What if I was overwhelmed with what we were dealing with and I missed that 10 day? So are you going to talk about that, or can you tell us what to do? How do we back up and punt if we miss that deadline?
I'm going to tell you, it's just going to depend on who gets that letter. They are required by notice to give you, you're supposed to have 10 days to request this. Sometimes you can get a sympathetic ear at Medicaid and sometimes they won't care. But I would definitely, in my continuation of benefits, say, we were at the hospital, we were unable to receive our mail, we were out of town. But I would hope that it's better to prevent this than have to fix it. So you can ask, say, listen, I want a continuation of benefits. As soon as we knew about it, we sent in this information and we requested it as soon as we knew about it. But you are really going to roll the dice to see if Medicaid will say yes or not. So I think you really have to be very proactive at reading that mail, which is terrible and frustrating and so scary. But parents, if your kid gets a letter that says there's a reduction of benefits, take a deep breath, send them a letter. Maite, can we do a sample letter that we can send to Allison and she can shoot? So we'll send
we'll put
everybody
that out.
but yeah, we'll send you guys a sample letter, and then Allison can email everybody. But I would definitely make sure if you're out of town and you have a kiddo on Medicaid, you need someone checking your mail.
Someone asked what a TWA 210 is when a parent received the letter from Medicaid benefits.
Are they speaking about a specific form?
It must be TWA 210. I personally am not familiar with that.
TWA. Can I have my tape? I don't necessarily recall every form by number. So what I would ask is I'm going to let my tape do a quick research.
Okay, perfect.
On the forms, and then we'll swing back.
And then the only other question that we have for right now is like, how do things change? So if we're under 18 and then we cross over the 18 bridge, are there some expectations that we should know, or are actions that should be taken at that time of transitioning and turning 18?
Yes, but can I answer that question when I get to a different slide?
Absolutely.
Because it's a great question, and I have a slide that kind of talks about it. So
perfect.
Okay, Rob, anything else on this? Okay, so they're talking about you can also call your managed care directly for continuation of benefits. I have never done that personally. Whoever just typed that out, that is right.
My only thing is I'd want the proof in my hands that the continuation has been submitted.
Yeah.
Just for my reassurance, that is something you can do, go through the MCO. But you won't have that piece of paper in your hand saying that you requested it.
I personally, I'm a controlling person. So how I practice law is what I would tell my sister for my nephew. I would not trust an insurance company to do anything. Sorry. All right. Okay, Rob, I'm going to let you do this. This is Rob's wheelhouse.
So this is really the crux of where we see things kind of go off the rails. We see all the mistakes, the misinformation, not enough information. This is the time where it affects your budget for the entire year or what you're going to get from Medicaid. And it's the time to be kind of hyper aware and do a lot of due diligence. And this always comes up during either your initial or your yearly assessment. And depending on what program you go, it's usually through an MCO that's going to come do the assessment.
And Rob, for the families, just to interrupt, for the families that may not know what an MCO is, can you kind of give them a brief overview, like managed care, Medicaid, just like a little elevator speech?
Sure. So
actually, can we even back up a little bit further for families that may have Medicaid and they never did an assessment? Maybe their kid didn't need services, they qualified for Medicaid, but maybe they're. Can we talk a little bit more about some of that as well?
Sure. So really, depending for every program, there's going to have to be an assessment, even if they didn't get one initially. Medicaid goes through and does the plan of care and the assessments for every individual who's receiving services. They usually do an initial, and then they do it on the anniversary or close to the anniversary of the benefits being granted. These assessments are completed through the managed care organization. So depending on what county you're in Texas, there's certain insurance companies who handle the kind of boots on the ground stuff for Medicaid. And here in Harris, for adults, it's United Health, Molina, and AmeriGroup. But depending on for kids, it's also Texas Children's and United, and I can't remember the other one. But there, really that goes from county to county, because each county has, or there's a map of it that you actually can get online that shows you what are the available MCOs for wherever you're at. The managed care organization, whoever you choose, will send someone out, usually a nurse. The quality of the nurses and the quality of the staff kind of vary, not even vary on MCO, but vary from person to person. And this is the time to make things easier on you and your family to have documents and have things ready to kind of spoon feed this person about what's going on is going to be the best thing to do. You know, I've been to an assessment with an MCO here in Houston for a child with Medicaid, and it was an MDCP program, and the nurse came, didn't even have a pad. She just showed up with her purse, and she sat down and started talking to the family. You know, that's the kind of, you know, that's on the low end. Then I've had other times where I've had nurses come in and they, you know, worked in NICUs before, and they, you know, have a lot of great experience, and they know how much it takes to take care of a person with special needs. So really the things we see is like the poor note taking, the examiner's not following along with you. They're, you know, on their cell phone back and forth. You know, they're busy, we're busy, but, you know, we want to make sure that they focus on us during that time, especially during this time of COVID, when they're just doing Zoom assessments, you know, because Zoom kind of condenses things anyways. You know, we see meetings that usually in person would last 2 hours, last an hour and a half. So when they're in that, you want to make sure you can get as much information to them as possible, make it easy for them, having prepared binders or notes or doctor's notes or things. That's one of the best things to have ready for them. You know, actually kind of get your homework ready. And also double check everything they give you. Don't sign anything before reviewing it. We see that a lot. We see people getting handed blank plans of care. You know, the nurse from the MCO will just hand them a plan of care that has nothing filled out on it. They say, "Here, sign this. We'll fill it out when we get back." You know, don't do that, because you don't know what they're going to put on there, and all of a sudden your signature is now on this plan of care that you don't agree to, and that's not going to help you out.
Robert, for the families that haven't gone through this process, I know with the people that are on here, some have and some haven't. Some are, you know, they haven't applied. You know, they don't necessarily qualify, so they're going to be applying soon. Their kid is transitioning, they're turning 18 or whatever. Can you talk to what the hope and the expectation is as you're going through this assessment? But I want you to talk, I mean, so we know of the families that the disabilities are super clear. Maybe the child doesn't walk, they don't talk, they have, you know, a G-tube or a number of different things. But what about an example of a kid that is turning 18 and they're going to be applying and going through this process, and from a functionality perspective, from an IQ perspective, they're not IDD, okay? They're actually pretty smart, but they have some physical limitations that need aid. For instance, you know, maybe they need help getting dressed, but they do pretty well academically, things like that. So what does a family like that, what should the expectation be? And what about families that have moderate to high functioning autism that they're dealing with? So can we talk about that? Because I think a lot of our audience fall into some of those categories, and I just wanted to hit on that a little, if that's okay.
Rob, can I jump in on this one?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. So, and then Rob, will you go to the slide that says know the medical requirement for your program? And then so everyone, we're gonna go out of order a little bit, but I think it's a good time. Here's the thing, y'all. There are 109 different Medicaid programs, which is why when your kiddo turns 18 or when you're planning for your child, you're like, which of these 109 programs are we going to be eligible for? And so I listed just a few of these. I focused on the waiver programs. We could spend 3 hours just talking about the different medical requirements for each Medicaid program. So if you've got a kiddo that has autism, I would encourage, is high functioning, when they turn 18, you know, they qualify for SSI. Maybe they qualify for Social Security because they meet that Social Security requirement that says they have a psychological or physical condition that's expected to last for at least a year, and it precludes them from having substantial gainful employment. So if you have a high functioning kiddo that's on autism, I would say maybe we look at SSI first. And then, of course, if you have $1 of SSI, that qualifies you for Medicaid. And within that spectrum of Medicaid services and SSI, there are other programs to help that high functioning kiddo maybe get caregivers with activities of daily living, and maybe have some assistance with therapy, medications, and so forth. So the short answer is, if you have a child that's high functioning autism, I would say look at SSI when you turn 18 and realize that Medicaid under the SSI program can pay for a lot more than doctors. And then once you're on SSI, it also leads you into employment assistance, and other programs that may be available through SSI. So that's kind of to answer that specific question. And also there's a Medicaid program. I don't have it listed here because, like I said, there's 109 Medicaid programs. We could spend days talking about it. But there's something that's called community care for the aged and disabled. And if someone just needs help with their activities of daily living, they can have 10 to 15 hours a week of home care for that. And we typically see it with older adults, but we have used it with younger folks who just need maybe like help with like a bathing or dressing or prompting. So unfortunately, there's 109 programs for y'all to have to meander through. My suggestion would be, a good place to start would be to get a diagnosis if you don't have one for your kiddo, because a lot of times families, they're so busy just living life, they don't may have an updated diagnosis. And then you work with a care manager, or you reach out to Disability Rights Texas or some other resource and figure out, this is my kid, what does he or she need? And then figure out, based on their care needs, which of these Medicaid programs are going to be a good fit. And I'm not trying to pitch us again, Allison, but if you want us to come back and talk more about transition planning medically for high functioning kiddos with autism, that may be something that we talk about specifically with this program. Some families may not be aware of. That's called community care for the aged and disabled. I'll have my Tyson with our little other notes and sample letter. I'll have her send you a little blurb for everybody.
We definitely will want to schedule that with you, because that is another topic that we haven't done. And because it's emerging and kind of a newer one, community first choice is what it, and so I think that would be something that we should put out there, because it is a good option for the right fit. So thank you for going deeper on that. I think, when we think about dealing like with SSI, for instance, we kind of use the word of, they're kind of order takers. So you kind of have to understand or know what you're applying for, or what you're doing, and what you're asking for. You have to, learn a little bit more. And if you don't know, work with somebody who does. But I think my question, and the reason I was asking that is because if you're going down this highway, and we've not done this before, what is the end? What is it that we're looking for, or being clear? I think even having a clear understanding of what it is that you hope for. You might not get what you hope for, but if you don't position it right, you're definitely not going to get what you hope for, or maybe what you even deserve. So I think that was kind of the premise behind that.
Sure. Okay, good. Okay, Rob, do you mind going back to the little chart here? Let's start with the friendly, not friends.
Sure. So I know that we really depend on the people at the managed care organizations, at the insurance companies. We really do. They are our lifeline to these programs. So a lot of times we start, seeing them as a part of our team. And they sort of are part of your team, but they don't work for you. They work for the managed care organization. They work for Medicaid.
They work for the insurance company.
Yeah. Yeah. So, they work for the insurance company. So, I always say, and this is something that when I used to run facilities, and I ran assisted living facilities for people with special needs, you have to be friendly with people, but you're not friends with them. Okay. You can't because you can't have an emotional relationship with them, because they're not always going to be on your side. They might not do that. So just give them straight answers. When they're giving you questions, you just give them the plain facts. This is not the time to play down. This is not the time to make things look worse. You just give them the straight about what's going on. And that's going to make it a lot easier going through it. The other thing I like to touch on real quick is even having handwritten notes is okay. You don't have to have anything fancy when you're meeting with people. Anything that you can do, like if you have to do a time study, you can do it yourself. You don't have to hire somebody. If you have to document about when they go see the doctor, you don't have to have, fancy spreadsheets or notes from from Texas Children's. It helps, and the dashboards make that a lot easier nowadays. But if you just have a little binder that you write things down in, that is okay. Just have some kind of data that you can give them. They're really just looking for that data. They want that.
I think one thing that we really share with families is in these types of communications, having kind of a good note-taking system yourself of who you talked to, what you talked about, what was said, when you faxed something in, that kind of detail. So same thing with the Social Security Administration, whatever you're dealing with, there tends to be a high turnover of people that you could be working with. And so having that kind of track record, because life gets busy and as the years go by and you have many, many pages of this kind of interaction and communication, or they say they didn't get something that you clearly did send and you have proof of it, the date that you send it, you've got confirmation. Those types of things are helpful. Just to be able, you don't have to be crazy about it, but just having a working document that you can keep those notes, I think is really important.
Oh yeah, anything you can do to be able to refer back, because if you guys are anything like me, I can't remember what I ate 2 days ago. I'm not going to remember when I took someone to the doctor's office, so I'm going to need that to be written down. So, just to make my life easier. Also, on a real quick point, if you do get a bad person, a bad examiner, a bad nurse to come in, you can request another one. You can ask the MCO to send someone different. If you continually having problems with the managed care organization, you can ask to change the managed care organization to whatever else is serving there. So
and so you'll know you have a bad assessment, a nurse assessor, if they come out without a piece of paper, if they spend less than 30 minutes with you, if they don't ask you detailed questions, if they're kind of like, yeah, or if they automatically say, oh, they're not qualified. I don't want someone, if you have, so an assessment, and just so we're clear, if you haven't applied for Medicaid, what happens is before Medicaid gives you benefits, they want a nurse to go out to make sure that you meet this medical requirement, which is different for every Medicaid program. And sometimes the nurses that go out this is not their specialty. So one of the things that our sister has done is she has gotten a copy of the assessment that the MCO is going to use. So before they come out, you may want to ask them for a copy of the assessment that they're going to use, and you fill it out for them. And then you just go through it line item by line item. If that nurse is not there for at least 2 hours, there's a problem.
And have your renewal assessment with you. When they come to do the renewal, have last year's ready to go and look through it before they show up.
I think that's really great advice. We work with a lot of people that really do want to be prepared, and they don't, if you've never done this before, you don't know what to expect. So I love that, requesting a copy of it. So you know what they're going to be asking. You're already prepared. You've already got your ducks in a row. Yes. So you don't feel like you're on the hot seat when they're there.
And then what we've seen too, and our sister did this too. My sister, she's Superwoman, but she will downplay the skilled care that my nephew needs. To this day, she does that. And so we have to be very real with her about what her life is like. So the other thing that we've done, especially if someone applies for a program, let's say you finally come up on that MDCP interest list and they say, oh, you don't have a G-tube or a trach, you're not medically fragile. Sorry. There are things that we can do to help establish that medical necessity. And we're going to go over that slide here in just a little bit. So that's why I'm saying it's so important for y'all to do the homework. And if y'all are willing to do that, you're going to have a better outcome. All right, Rob, let's get the next slide. I think this is really kind of a regurgitation, but this is kind of a summary of why people get a denial of services or reduction of benefits. Maite, do you have anything you want to add to this?
I think the two important things on here is the thing about goals, because this is something we've ran into lately.
Okay.
If you're getting past HAB hours, you have to make sure you have goals, right, Maite?
There needs to be a very clear objective and a way that you're going to fix that in order for them to establish the need for that particular area.
And y'all tell them what past HAB hours are.
It's like a rehab it's like learning hours. So hours to get better at something, not hours to get take care of, but hours to get rehab.
One thing too that I'm seeing, like there's a push-pull, like when it comes to medical records. So in general, the general consensus of human beings is I don't want anything bad in my medical records, because that could prevent me from getting insurance or other things in the future if somebody gets my records. But to me, this is the timeline where, so Christina, like you, I want to control things when it comes to my kid and when it came to her benefits, and I requested her records first. I wanted to see what was in there, because there's mistakes in medical records. Absolutely.
That's a great point, Allison.
All the time.
Yeah.
And so I was able, and actually there were some mistakes in my child's records. And before we went through this process, I worked with her doctor, and her doctor corrected them. And it was just wrong. It just needed to be correct. And so this is the exact opposite of where you need everything clearly documented in these records. Every ailment, every limitation, every diagnosis,
every emergency room visit.
Mm-hmm.
Everything. It's so important.
This is a good takeaway. Make sure every emergency room visit is documented in there. So if you are Texas Children's, but you went to the Methodist ER and you because that's maybe closer where you were, make sure TCH has it in their records, because they're only going to pick up maybe the TCH ER if that's where you went.
And usually they will go, so we always say having, all the names, address, and phone numbers of the PCP and any of the physicians that the child sees is all good. But typically what they're going after initially is those PCP records. And then they'll reach out, like if we have a strong history with neurology and all the other ones. But just a quick phone call or an email through my chart or whatever, just saying I'm getting ready to go through this process, they're going to be requesting your records, and I realized I need to see what these records are before they would be sent. I know you get these requests all the time. Can you please send me or provide me access of what would be sent for my son? And then you can look at it. And I think it's just a good step. It might be a little over the top, I admit that, but because of all the mistakes I've seen over the years in the records, I think it's worth the time to do it.
Absolutely. And the other thing I would just like to add, for those of you who really like to do the homework, I would get letters from the PCP, the neurologist, and I would write the letter. And you're going to have the letter written based on the medical requirement for that specific Medicaid program. So Rob, will you go to know the medical requirement for your program? So for example, if you're applying for class, you want to be sure that the doctor, and I would like to have a doctor's letter that says, my patient, John Smith, is a person with an intellectual disability and was disabled for age 22, and his disability affects his ability to function in daily life, and then provide examples of that. And then moms and dads and caregivers or grandmas or whoever's on the phone or the call today, you write that letter and then have the doctor review it and sign it. Otherwise, the doctor may be like, yes, this person needs Medicaid, thank you.
So with the intellectual disabilities, basically what they're referring to, and I just want to kind of chime in on this, is an IQ of 70 or below, or 75 and below with multiple disabilities. So if you're wondering, like, what is that score or what does that look like? And the other thing is your child might be on the list and their IQ may be well above that. They're not in that range. You still want to leave them on the list. We don't know what the future holds.
Or get them reassessed on their IQ. I mean, you may, I mean, that testing can be inconsistent. So
sure.
And there are,
and this is, you prove this at the time that you come up on the list, not the
Right.
time that you go on the
Exactly.
list. So it could be 17 years from now and you're proving, you know, whether or not you qualify for this. So I just wanted people to know that, you know, that's what they're looking at for the, when it says intellectual disability, and I see the 75 or less on there with a related condition for HCS.
Sure. And there's one little question that just popped up. I know you told me to chat, but you know, I'm a little obsessive about stuff like that. So they wanted to mention that the parents must participate in the Medicaid annual assessment to maintain benefits. So if you don't do the annual assessment, Medicaid will stop benefits. Now that the caveat to that is right now under the CARES Act, the only way that you can lose Medicaid eligibility, you can still get a reduction and you still may not get approved at the initial assessment, but you're not going to lose Medicaid benefits under the current CARES Act unless you die, move states, or actively disenroll from the Medicaid program. So that may not always be the Medicaid policy, but that just FYI. So Rob, let's go to MDCP. So one little comment about MDCP is that we see a lot of families that are denied at the initial assessment because they may not have a specific medical need that looks like it needs nursing care. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to tell you a story, not a story, but a sample. We had an appeal recently that we won where the child contracted bacterial meningitis at age 2 and now has multiple seizures during the day. Initially, he was denied medical necessity benefits because they didn't think he had a skilled need because he didn't have a trach, he didn't have a G tube, which is kind of the low-hanging fruit way to qualify somebody medically for MDCP. But what we were able to show is he has a seizure program. He cannot communicate if he has illness as a typical 2-year-old would. So just because they tell you at the initial outset that your child does not meet doesn't meet Medicaid benefits based on the specific medical requirement, I would say don't give up the fight. We'll go over a couple more pieces of information for you, but the MDCP program for those in the audience, this is where we try to prove that this child needs a very high level of Medicaid. He or she needs skilled care, but the definition of skilled care can be expansive to needing medication reminders, not being able to communicate pain, not being at risk for wandering. Rob, do you want to throw in any other things I'm missing as samples?
Sure. Chronic constipation, falls, anything that requires somebody to evaluate the patient to make sure they're not in any further peril.
Constipation is big. Listen, constipation is huge. So don't be shy about talking about it. If you're a parent or a guardian or a caregiver, poop should be like a common conversation. It's okay. Because what happens is if you are doing anything to prevent constipation, what you're doing is you're actively providing nursing care to prevent fecal impaction, which can cause sepsis and infection and lots of complicated medical issues.
And really, I would say this is also where your doctor's letters come in. A lot of times when it comes to the nursing level of need for Medicaid, in the doctor's letters, we like them to put if the patient was not at home receiving this high level of care from their parents, they would need to be in a nursing level of care facility. And that really kind of sends that message home that they do need nursing care.
What do you guys think about, so I know like the Harris Center, Texana is another one. These are places where you're getting on these lists, the class lists, and the class is the 800 number, but HCS and all these other lists, you go through your local authority, which again is the Harris Center. It used to be MHMRA. Some of you only know it as MHMRA, and in Fort Bend it's Texana. Um, do you recommend or not recommend going through the assessment process through the Harris Center, for instance, to I've seen reports that they've put out before of the level of need. Do you have any thoughts on that or any information on that?
I like getting involved, getting the local authority involved, especially if we're looking if we're looking at trying to get a diversion slot, because the sooner we can get the local authority, the LIDDA involved, the faster that goes. And we're talking, when we say a quick rundown of diversion spot is that sometimes we can skip a wait list for a program by saying this person's needs are so high that whenever a slot opens up, that they can be put ahead of everybody. And that's only granted through the local authority. So if we're even thinking about this, we're going to need the local authority to go ahead and have that assessment done, to have paperwork already on this person, because that's just going to be another step we're going to have to do if we're going to try to do that diversion.
And to piggyback on that, the diversion slot. So again, these are dire situations. Like an example of one that was recently granted was a grandfather who had guardianship of his adult grandson who had mental, schizophrenia, just a myriad of different things. Maybe it sometimes was a threat to himself and others. Grandma died, mom is dead. There's like no help, and he's like in a pinch. Like grandpa's in a pinch. The grandson is at risk of being institutionalized, and if he's not institutionalized, grandpa needs to quit work, and he can't afford to quit work. So this is an example of an emergent, situation where some kind of intervention needed to happen. So there's so many different situations that are out there, but I guess I think escalated, like it's kind of an escalated thing, more so than this child is difficult, or those types of things, like I have nobody else, or I'm sick myself, I'm the sole caregiver for this individual that's disabled, and I can no longer even care for myself. Those types of situations are there's many different kinds, but basically those are the ones where they start thinking about a possibility of a diversion slot and you moving up on the 17-year wait list, or however long. I've heard longer, actually.
And my thought is, even if your kiddo is on Medicaid, but it's not providing enough hours, or for some reason it's not working, you may want to transition from maybe like an MDCP to HCS. And the reason why we want to go from nursing home to the maybe medically fragile, aka nursing home Medicaid at home, to the HCS, which is home and community services, is because, as parents on the call may know, HCS also is the funding source for these small group, one of the funding sources for these small group homes. So for our nephew, he is on MDCP. We would like to transition him to HCS, because this is what I think somebody kind of asked me about this, because at age 21, he's going to go, our nephew James will go from MDCP to what we call Star Plus waiver for adults. And we will typically see a reduction in benefits or hours at that 21-year age when you transition from MDCP, which is the children's medically fragile program, to the medically fragile adult program. So if you have a pediatric, you have a kiddo that's under 18, sometimes it's easier for us to do that bypass, even if you're on MDCP to HCS. So we're going to try that with my sister. Hopefully she'll cooperate, and then we'll let you know.
One thing, and we're kind of coming around the bend, we're about a quarter till, and this was a question that popped up in the chat earlier, and this is actually something that we hear about on a weekly basis. So what about, so if my child's getting SSI and Medicaid, and then I'm going to retire or I become disabled through the Social Security Administration, then my child, starts getting 50% of my retirement benefit essentially. What do I do? What do I do so I don't lose Medicaid? Because
Yeah.
this is and we talk
Yeah.
about a lot of trust and other things in
Yeah.
the past, but can you just talk about
Yeah.
that?
Absolutely. Mike said, we make a note to do DAC.
Sure.
Okay. Okay. Here's the thing. You got a kiddo. They were on SSI. You did become disabled, you retire or you die. If you if you retire or you become disabled and you start pulling Social Security, your kiddo goes from SSI, which is 700 and change a month, to whatever 50% of your work earnings are going to be. What will typically happen is that increase in Social Security will bump your kiddo off of SSI, which is a problem because as long as you have $1 of SSI, you apply for Medicaid. Now, there is a program that's called the Disabled Adult Child. How it's supposed to work is that Social Security is supposed to talk to Medicaid and let Medicaid know, yeah, this kiddo, the only reason why they're not eligible for Medicaid is because of the parental earnings, because the parent died, retired, or became disabled. So don't take away Medicaid. The system has supposed to gotten better, but every once in a while, we will still have to reapply for Medicaid. But here's the thing. As long as your kiddo is eligible for Medicaid, and the only reason why they have lost Medicaid is because of this income, meaning their assets are less than $2,000 and their medical needs still meet that Social Security requirement, they will not look at the Social Security that you're giving or that they're earning based on your work earnings. But that's called Disabled Adult Children's Medicaid. The way that the regulations work, it should be a smooth transition. That happens about 50% of the time. Okay. So that's the short answer for that.
So, and then on the waivers, it gets a little bit more complicated because basically if you lose Medicaid, then you're at risk of losing any waiver if you happen to be one of the lucky ones that's already getting a waiver. And isn't it like 130%? I'm trying to remember if it's like 2330 or I forget the number for 2021, but there's like a percentage over that $2,000. So the bottom line is the number to remember is $2,000, less than $2,000 in the individual with disabilities name.
So there's income and there's assets. It sounds like you were talking about the federal poverty income limits, which impact how much income comes in. $2,000 is your bank balance, and the federal poverty income limits will impact the income that comes in. So
no, I am speaking of the assets, but there's a separate number that's a percentage higher. I'll go back and pull that up and I'll put that out in my email.
Okay.
But there's a percentage for the waivers above that $2,000 before you lose it, before you lose.
Okay.
So I'll pull that up and I will definitely send that out. It's not much more. It's like, it's like less than 2,300. It's not like it's a lot more.
But I would keep it real simple and just do $2,000.
Just keep it under $2,000.
Just keep it simple.
Is a good idea. I agree.
Okay. So if you get a loss of benefits, here's your takeaway. Everybody knows you file a continuation of services within 10 days. Does everybody on this call silently say yes? Thank you. Okay. Yes, thank you, Ruth. When you get the denial, Medicaid is going to send you a letter saying why you're getting a reduction of benefits. This is part of new legislation to make it easier for parents. Sometimes they will embed this reason down on page 299 of a 300-page packet. You have to read every letter, but you want to find out on the discontinuation or reduction or denial, the specific reason. We have seen it embedded recently. I'm telling you, it was page 299 out of 300 pages. They said, we didn't know why you went to the emergency room. That's why they denied the case. We know you went to the emergency room. We know the treatment you have, but we don't know why. The other reason why we've seen is you didn't send us the exact amount of minutes each attendant was doing work for you. Give Medicaid what they want. This is what I have learned during the Medicaid appeals. I think my client meets all this criteria, all this procedure, all these definitions, regardless of what we send in, they should say yes. Give Medicaid exactly what they ask for. So file that continuation of benefits, complete the appeal, review the service plan line by line. What I do is when I get a denial of benefits or reduction, I look at what the assessment was, and I go through and I say, number one, it was marked 1, but it should have been marked 3. It is that tedious. If your headspace is too full to do this, find somebody in your life, whether it's a teenager or a friend, and have them help you with this. Otherwise, you are not going to have the emotional ability, because you're so busy just taking care of your kids, to do this. Contact your service provider.
And I say don't give up, because we see
Yes.
families that are so frustrated by the back and forth, whether it's with Medicaid or the Social Security Administration, and then they say, forget it. I'm just not doing this. I'm over this. And it's easy to say that. And honestly, I have felt that way myself.
Yes.
with my own child. But what I would say is, in the end, they really may need this. And so it's easy to walk away or forget it or set it on the coffee table, not look at it, or just, we're not doing this. But ultimately, I think it's really important, and it's necessary.
If you feel that way, then your next step is to call a friend or a family member.
Or an attorney.
Or Disability Rights Texas, and know that you are not going to be able to do this by yourself, and that's totally okay.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, certainly people have been in your shoes, or, Christina and I were talking about earlier about how families feel like everything that they say is loaded. Like no matter what they say, it's wrong. Like, they're scared to talk. They're scared to just tell the truth, tell the true story. They're scared of what's going to be taken away. And after however many hours and years and days they've spent dealing with this kind of thing, and they finally got it set up, and there's, they're scared. I just want to encourage that there's help out there for you with this. And if you have felt that way, or you're feeling that way, you're certainly not alone, for sure.
Absolutely. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So what we try to do is always prevent an appeal. And we do that by getting a good assessment and by giving Medicaid what they want. A couple of things about the appeal. You should get a copy of everything that Medicaid is going to present at the appeal. We're going to have you request medical records. And here's the thing, you can delay this appeal. This is your kid. They're going to say, oh, I don't know if we can do that. And they're going to act like it's their own money they're spending on your kid. Here's the thing. You can delay, and the reason why you need to delay is maybe you need doctor's letters. Maybe you need to gather those medical records. Maybe you need to review the medical records. So if you feel like you're not ready, go ahead and delay. If you feel like you need to, please do that. If they won't do it, or they've given you enough delays, you can always show up at the hearing and say, dear hearing officer, I know you said we couldn't have another delay, but here's the specific things that I want. You can also ask that the record be kept open to provide additional information. I would suggest, when you're preparing for an appeal, and again, I'm going to give you just kind of a thumbnail sketch. Make sure you gather everything that Medicaid says that they haven't received or need to qualify you for Medicaid. That is, give Medicaid what they want. Sometimes if you send this in before the appeal, they may not require an appeal, and they may say, okay, we're going to give you what you want. When you prepare the information to Medicaid, do it just like a letter to the hearing officer. You know your kiddo, outline the issues that you've identified in that assessment or the plan of care, and provide a reason why Medicaid was wrong and supporting medical documentation. Rob, you want to go to the hearing? Again, we talked about emergency room visits. Make sure you've got all the good medical information, letters from the doctors, and make sure that you've got all the information included there that will help you win. Okay, at the hearing, and I'm sorry we're going so fast, guys, but I just want to make sure we go through a couple more things. Okay, at the hearing, Bob, we go, okay, the next slide, please. Don't have anything scheduled that day. Medicaid will usually, the Medicaid agency will go first. While they're going, if there's anything that's wrong, be sure you write it down. Be sure you show up, call in on time. The only person you have to convince is Medicaid. Use your time wisely, address the issues that are brought up by Medicaid. This is not the time to complain about Medicaid or complain about the caregivers. Try to keep your emotions out. It's very difficult. Don't argue with the hearing with anybody. Just focus on the hearing officer. It's not your job to convince Medicaid. It's your job just to convince the hearing officer. And Medicaid is supposed to provide a response within 90 days.
And I would say the other important thing is that, so the hearing officer a lot of times is looking at the Medicaid policy, that the policy has been followed. So you might get a decision that says that Medicaid upholds the hearing officer upholds the decision by Medicaid, but you still might get your hours. So you could lose the hearing, but actually get your hours back, or get some of your hours back. So that's not uncommon.
And then after the hearing,
and it's all records, right? Somebody said PT and OT, basically anything related to the disability, any kind of services that that is happening should be documented.
Yes, I would pull that IEP if they've got an IEP.
Any neuropsych
testing, bring it all.
For sure. Okay, good.
And if you have a bad decision, if you get the hearing back, so sometimes we'll have a hearing and the hearing officer will uphold the judge's decision, but in the same letter, give us what we want. Or miraculously, they'll uphold the decision by the Medicaid, and then all of a sudden a new assessment will be requested.
Are all of these hearings being held by Zoom right now due to the pandemic, or any of them live in person?
They've always been by phone.
Okay.
Which has many issues with it as far as presenting evidence in a clear way.
Visual.
Yeah, so one of the things, Maite, you want to do just a quick summary about all the documentation prep that you do? You could go on, I know, for hours, but can you give like a 2-minute, 1 minute on how to do the paperwork for Medicaid appeals?
So the documentation we usually request, so we'll have open records that we'll request. We're requesting everything from the very beginning, the initial assessment, all the way to current. And so there's a specific email that you can use to request all of that information that is within the records of Health and Human Services. There's also the Texas Medicaid and Healthcare Partnership that you can request for specific medical documents that they may have. And requesting the letters directly from your doctors. So going through and making sure that all of the physicians that are listed within that their hearing summary or the assessment that was done, that all of those doctors have provided you with something in writing, giving all of the details that we described earlier.
Perfect. Okay. So if you don't get what you want, you can resubmit information. You have 1 year to do that, but you have to show that there's a change in condition or needs. You can request an administrative review. I haven't had a whole lot of success with that. Pretty much they just rubber stamp what the agency said. Judicial review, that's you go to Austin and district court. That usually doesn't have a good outcome. Request that the hearing be reopened. I'm sorry, that should be within 1 year after the final decision, and then maybe a new assessment. So here's what happens. Usually you get the denial, the reduction, excuse me, if you get the reduction of benefits, then you have 10 days to do the continuation of services. By the time we get everything ready, it might be 6 months, 9 months before we actually go to hearing. And so sometimes the annual review or the annual assessment will pop up either during or right after the hearing. So sometimes the way to address an issue is by a new assessment. And then the other tidbit I would add is sometimes the managed care organization or the service provider is the worst person to fix things, because a lot of times it's the information they sent Medicaid that caused this problem. So what we did with a recent case is we reached out to the nurse that does the utilization review at THHSC. That's the governing agency that makes the medical determinations for Medicaid. And we are working on clarifying the documentation that we need to get this young man as many past have hours as we can. So Rob, you want to add anything to that?
Nothing that I have.
I think we work directly with the service coordinator as well with the LIDDA.
Yeah.
Indirectly with everyone that's involved within the service plan for.
And like there's also some push-pull. You might lose some hours in one area, but maybe there's some hours you can make up in another. So working with the LIDDA in those instances really does help.
For sure. Well, I've got time, so I would like to thank you both, all of you, for being here today and sharing this information. This has been recorded. If you can forward to the next slide or two, the following things are things that should be on your radar as it relates to planning. And we have a lot of topics on this. We are going to put this out there on our YouTube channel, so you will be able to get a playback of this, and you'll get a recording of this later today. And if you'll just forward to the next slide, if Christina and her team can be of assistance to you and kind of your journey and what you're dealing with this, certainly do reach out to their law firm. Christina has been around for forever and is very, very well recognized in the special needs community. So I, for one, am very thankful for the opportunity for you to speak to these families today. So thanks for sharing this. This
thank you, Allison.
Complicated with all the other moving parts of SSI, SSDI, and all, just understanding those differences. It is all very confusing, and we aim to educate and put a lot of information out there so you can navigate some of this yourself. We know it's hard. You're not alone. And again, I just wanted to thank everybody for being here today, and thank you, Christina and team, for all of your information.
Yeah, so, and parents, guardians, caregivers, y'all can do this. You know your kid, and Allison's right. You can do this. It's okay. It's okay. You got it.
You've got this, and we've got resources to share and information. And so, like I said, I'm happy you're here. So
thank you.
Thank you. Have a great afternoon, everyone.
Everybody have a great day. Thank you for coming. Bye.
Bye now.